That's the music from the live stream, right? I just checked it myself.
I think the last person to talk is the one that takes over the screen on the live stream. So, I think the last person to talk is the one that takes over the screen on the live stream.
All right, seeing it's 7 o'clock, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And please rise for the Pledge of the Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hello, my name is Bryce Larrabee. I am the chair of the Bow School Board. And let's face it, this is an unusual time. A month ago, when this meeting was originally scheduled for March 13th, our community was in a much different place. In fact, I remember it well because I went to the March 11th town meeting and returned, and I can remember my son telling me that the NBA had been suspended, and I remember, that's it, this is going to change everything, and it certainly did. But when we were looking forward to our March 13th meeting, the school board and the school itself was in a very different position. The posted warrant was unanimously agreed upon by the school board and the budget committee, and everyone involved expected a short, non-controversial meeting was going to take place on the 13th. Well, that was a month ago. And with the stay-at-home order and its effect on the economy, we've developed alternative procedures for the district meeting that will allow decision-making to process to proceed while respecting social distancing. It will also allow for changes to the warrant to reflect our new reality. The procedures and backup information for this process are found in the SAU 67 website at bonet.org. So just to recap, tonight is just an informational session from the school board. Following tonight, there'll be an opportunity to provide comments and questions by email or phone, and we'll provide the address for how to do that throughout the night. Remember to begin every email or phone call with your name and address. Then Friday night, the school board will meet again in the same format that we have here now, the 24th, and we will have considered the feedback gathered. We will answer questions that have been presented to us prior to that meeting, and then the board at that time can offer motions and vote to amend any warrant article. The warrant articles will not be changing other than the dollar amounts. In other words, amendments will be allowed to decrease or increase, I think that's unlikely, the dollar amounts on the articles, but all the articles will remain in place, regardless of what happens between now and Friday. And then Saturday, the 25th, the warrant, as amended, if we amend it on Friday, which I anticipate we will be voted on by drive-by process from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Bow High School. Remember, if you're going to go and vote, you have to have an ID with you. And so make sure you bring that ID before you drive to the high school. Now I'd like to introduce the rest of the school board. The vice chair is Jennifer Strong-Rain. She just waved. Jenna Reardon, Eric Schulman, and Martin Osterloh, our newest member. I do want to mention that normally we have this meeting at the high school and we would have a bit of a ceremony for outgoing member June Branscombe. June was a member for 9 years and just was just such an asset to the board for all those years. Nobody took more time and put in more effort than June over that time period. She frequently go to events that others weren't able to, and her services will be missed. Ironically, she was planning to go on an Italian cruise when she left the board back in March, which obviously did not happen. Also joining us tonight is the district moderator, Jim Hayden. Jim is in charge of the process and the meeting, and also our district school attorney and a Bow resident, Matt Upton. Finally, here to offer support for the process is the superintendent, Dean Cascadden, the business administrator, Dwayne Ford, and the director of technology, Roy Bailey. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded so that it can be viewed at a later time. To report any technical issues, call 603-415-3558. Next slide, please, Roy. Actually, I don't see any slides on where I'm looking. Maybe I need to adjust my viewing. Great. Thanks, Roy. Normally, Dr. Cascadden would give an annual statement of the district presentation and talk about our mission statement, enrollment trends, and district highlights. Instead, for this year, Article 1 will concern the special meeting procedures adopted to comply with executive orders as part of the COVID pandemic response. Moderator Jim Hayden will present Article 1. Jim?
Thank you, Bryce. As Bryce says, I'm Jim Hayden, your school district moderator. And again, welcome to the strangest school district meeting Bow has ever held. In the 4 weeks since our originally scheduled meeting, Bow teachers and students have transitioned from classroom-based to 100% online learning, demonstrating astounding resilience, flexibility, and patience. They are doing their part to keep our community's educational system intact, and I ask the voters of Bow to do the same. The school board, the superintendent, the school district attorney, town safety officials, school district clerk, and I have spent many hours trying to come with a workable plan for the holding of this meeting within the strictures of state law and the principles of public health. Before describing the procedures, I want to thank everyone who has helped with this plan for their effort, and you, the Bow voters, for your participation, your patience, and your cooperation. The procedures, which now have been emailed to many voters, posted on the school district website, and widely publicized to the voters of Bow, are intended to simulate a traditional town meeting while addressing the challenges of physical distance that interfere with our ability to discuss and debate issues in the same room. While these procedures are not perfect, we have done our very best to ensure that the issues are properly presented to you and your questions and comments are properly addressed. As Bryce says, we'll start with a presentation on the warrants and the articles tonight. You will have an opportunity to present your questions and concerns by email and by telephone at the email address that is going to be presented to you in a minute, right, Roy? Next slide, please. There we go. And then on Friday, the board will come again together in front of you in this virtual meeting to discuss the questions and comments and to answer those questions, and if they so choose, propose amendments to the articles that would end up on the final written ballot for you for Saturday voting. At the end of that meeting, we will immediately post the form of ballot so that you will have an opportunity to review it Friday night and vote on Saturday, and even prepare it in advance before you come to the meeting. It'll be prepared and it'll be posted on the website once the board finalizes it at the meeting on this coming Friday night. As you probably know well by now, we're going to handle the balloting by drive-through process that first requests that you check in with the checklist as you would do at the front door at any school district meeting. We would encourage folks to arrive if your name begins with the letters A to M at 9 o'clock, letters N to Z at 11 o'clock. And the voting is being held open for 4 hours so that we can avoid lines at Bow High School. Of course, yep.
I think they can come at any time between 9 and 11 and 11 and 1, correct? You don't want everybody coming right at 9. Is that correct?
That's correct, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, please, yes, don't come all at 9. So the first question on the written ballot will allow you, the voters, to decide whether the procedures meet your approval. I believe that these procedures are fair and equitable in the world of COVID-19, and I hope you agree. But you should know that if the procedures are rejected by the voters, no votes will count, and I, as moderator, will recess the meeting so we can consider alternative methods of holding this meeting. If the procedures are approved but the budget fails, the votes on all other questions will be recorded, and I, as moderator, will recess the meeting so that we can consider the budget again. Recessing the meeting is required in that instance because there is no default budget under our town meeting process. If the voters don't pass a budget in any year, the schools would not be able to operate, so we have to reconvene the meeting at a later date to address the budget. On Saturday, the voters will make the decisions that are fundamental to the school district of Bow and our town meeting process. I would encourage you to send questions and comments you may have about this process and these proceedings to me between now and Friday, and I will be happy to address them during the Friday virtual meeting. So at this point, I would ask for the next slide where Jennifer Strongring can present on Article 2, which is the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you for those in the community who are with us this evening. As a school board rep for the Budget Committee, I will be presenting the budget this evening, which is Article 2, and as it reads, to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the Budget Committee's recommended amount of $30,350,341 for the support of schools, for the payment of salaries for the school district officials and agents, and for the payment of statutory obligations of the district. This article does not include appropriations voted on in other warrant articles. This article does include the cost of the Bow School District Food Service Program. When we had our budget hearing in February, this budget was recommended by the Budget Committee 7-0, and it was also recommended by the school board 5-0. Before I go into some of the details of the budget, I wanted to take a moment and say that this year's current budget was a very collaborative effort with the Budget Committee. It was a very respectful process, and we all worked hard to balance what the school and students need, while also being mindful of the overall number and the impact that it has on our community. Again, as I stated at the Budget Committee in February, both the Budget Committee and the school board were in agreement with this budget. Next slide, please. This year's budget is up over last year's. If you have the slides, or if you're live streaming with us right now, you can see that this it's up about $1 million. But this budget addresses the increasing needs of our students. Classroom size tells just a small part of today's education story. Students are coming to us with most social and emotional needs, cognitive needs, and medical needs. Our student profile has changed, and they need more and different support than needed in the past. This year's budget addresses this by asking for more special ed teachers and guidance support. Personnel is one of the main drivers in this year's budget. This year's budget also includes warrant articles number 5 and 7 from the 2019 annual meeting, which help cover the contracts for our teachers and support staff. Next slide, please. While the budget is up, we're also happy to report that our revenue is also up, just over $900,000. Next slide, please. Adequacy aid is also seeing an increase this year. The estimated adequate education grant is seeing an increase of about $520,000, while the estimated statewide education property tax, otherwise known as SWEPT, is seeing an increase of about $46,000. Next slide, please. So, what does this mean to our taxes, and what type of tax impact does it have for us? While the budget is up over $1 million, as I stated, our revenue are estimated to increase just over $900,000. There's also the increase of our education aid. So overall, the local tax impact on just the budget is a small decrease. Next slide, please. As I just kind of briefly went over the slides and any of the budget, if you want to go into more detail, please go on to bonet.org, and any of the resources that you need can be found there to take a closer look. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm now going to pass the meeting back over to Bryce Larrabee to discuss Articles 3 and 4. You're on mute, Bryce.
Sorry about that. Inevitable, right? Roy, next slide, please. So Article 3 and 4 are both related to the Bow Elementary School project renovation / addition, and I'll be talking about both these sort of back and forth. But first, I'll just read the Article 3. Article 3 is to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $150,000 for the architectural design fees, engineering fees, and other costs associated with the construction, renovation, addition, and repairs to Bow Elementary School, as proposed by the Bow School Board, and to authorize with the withdrawal of up to $150,000 from the Bow School District Buildings Construction Capital Reserve Fund established in March 1992. Just a majority vote is required on this article. When last discussed with the school board and budget committee, both passed this unanimously. The school board 5-0, the budget committee 7-0. Next slide, please, Roy. So this is essentially the fees that'll cost to get better information in order to do a renovation / addition for the Bow Elementary School. Article 3 is designed to do that. Article 4, which we'll talk about in a minute, was a plan to deposit $1 million into the capital reserve for the project implementation, bringing the total amount of money set aside for that project to $2.7 million. If that went forward, the plan would be we'd spend $150,000 on the design fees over the course of the next school year, and then at the March 21 annual meeting, the expectation is we would vote at that time for that project. This article, Article 3, does not have any impact on the taxes because it would be pulling that $150,000 out of that capital reserve fund. The $1 million, which we'll talk about more in a minute, would have a pretty substantial impact on the taxes. Next slide, please. So for those that aren't aware of the Bow Elementary School project, there's been talk of doing something with the elementary school for a number of years, 5-6 years at least. And so about a year ago, a committee was formed. I think there are 16 members of it. Fantastic committee that had all sorts of different folks from the community, educators, police and fire folks, a number of engineers that live in town, different folks with so many different abilities to assist in coming together to figure out essentially what is it that the Bow Elementary School needs. So that committee met frequently, and then they came and met with the school board and essentially said, here's what happens if you just absolutely do the bare minimum to, keep the building from falling apart. And then they also said several other options, which are, this is what you can do with a little bit of assistance for doing something more. Here's something else, and then here's something if you do everything. And so what the school board had done at that time was the board asked the committee to come up with a plan that was kind of in between the two larger ones. We did not really take into account the ones that were just essentially keep the building from falling apart, and nor did anyone on the subcommittee suggest that that was a viable option. They just gave it to us as a form of a frame of reference. So what they came to us with was, as you see on the screen for those on the internet, essentially a 6 classroom addition. The heavy renovation of the office and entrance is primarily driven by security concerns, Parkland type of problems to avoid that, to have a better entrance. Light renovation to the existing classrooms. The classrooms are an odd size. And are really, if school was built today, they wouldn't allow classrooms the size that they have. They also have essentially virtually no electrical outlets, which you can imagine this day and age is a big requirement. And then a whole host of other things: a new roof, windows, elevator, generator, a secondary access road, again for safety reasons, fire alarm panel, communication system. They can't even communicate from the office to all the different classrooms. A new HVAC system. There is no sprinkler system presently, and then secondary building access to the playground. You can't go through the building to get to the second floor presently, which is where the playground is. And then finally, a parking lot rehab. So that is really what the project was looking at doing. Next slide, please. So design fees were a component of that, and what the committee did this past year is they spent $15,000 in an effort to get some professional help in some areas, and what the money would go towards is as you can see, a design team selection, refine the design with more detailed drawings, selection of a construction company, and then the estimated project costs for the March 21 annual meeting. I was not on this subcommittee. I don't know much about construction, but the school board met with these folks on a few occasions. And so in layman's terms, as best I understand it, essentially the more money you put towards these design fees, the tighter you can anticipate what the project's going to be. You're going to be able to put a fine-tooth comb really on exactly what it is you're looking for. At one point we were talking about $700,000 to do this, and they would give us specific drawings into exactly what we need. And then at other times we're talking about, well, why don't we just do 15,000 or what have you. And so the number that we landed on was 150,000 in order to get more detailed information and drawings, and that's what really that money is designed to do. Like I said, that would come out of the capital design fees. Next slide, please. So again, this is the same slide. It's the $150,000 to take from the capital reserve fund. It would not be an impact to the taxes, and put it towards the design fees. Next slide, please. So Article 4, I'll read this as well. Article 4 is to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $1 million to be added to the Bow School District Buildings Construction Capital Reserve Fund established in March 1992. Set amount to come from taxation. This also just requires a majority vote, and it was approved by the school board 5-0, as well as the budget committee 7-0, back when we were anticipating a meeting on March 13th. Next slide, please. So this would be a deposit into the capital reserve fund. Presently, the balance in the capital reserve fund is approximately $1.1 million. There was just under $700,000 prior to the current budget or school year. That was back in June of 2019. There was 700,000. Then last year, as a town, we voted to put $400,000 more towards this project. So that adds up to the 1.1. In addition to that, there's another HVAC capital reserve fund that could be eligible for this project, which would add in another $541,000 roughly. And so if the $1 million was added to the capital reserve fund, with the HVAC, 541,000, that would be a total of $2.7 million that would be set aside for the Bow Elementary School project. If we were to do that, the tax increase would be 47 cents, because it's a $600,000 increase compared to what we did last year, which was a deposit of 400,000. Next slide, please. So this is again the same slide to appropriate $1 million to set aside for this. Now, the school board has talked, and times have really changed since we came up with that plan. I mean, we don't know what the future holds with the COVID pandemic, and we're uncomfortable going forward with the proposal that we've made so far. I've asked to have another slide prepared to discuss some additional options for Article 3 and Article 4. And next slide, please. So these were some options that we had discussed. One of the options we've discussed is, well, what if we do this budget year the same thing we did last year, which would be set aside an additional 400,000 towards the project, and then have design fees of $15,000. That's what we've done in this past year. If we were to do that, that would actually reduce our taxes by 47 cents, but on the tax rate, which equates to $165 on a $350,000 home. We could also eliminate it altogether. And so the way we do that, we can't remove the warrant article, but instead we would just say the warrant article, we were trying to raise $1. And if we were to do that, which means we wouldn't add any more money to that capital reserve fund, and we wouldn't set aside any money for any sort of design fees, that would be a reduction of 78 cents on the tax rate, or $274 on a $350,000 home. Now, a couple things to keep in mind as it relates to those issues. Like I said earlier, the plan was to go forward with this at a year from now, essentially, with a presentation of what this project would look like. And so it'll be really challenging for us to do that in March of 2021 without putting aside more money for the design fees. And putting aside the 400,000 or $1 million, it doesn't have a big difference. And what I mean by that is this project, as best I can tell, is in the neighborhood of a $10 million project. And so even if the $1 million was set aside, that would have $2.7 million in the capital reserve fund. There would still need to be significant bonding. I mean, it would still need to have $5, $6, $7 million in bonds that are going to have to go forward. So there's going to be bonding involved either way. and it would just mean an additional $1,000,000 or $400,000 that would need to be bonded as opposed to set aside at this time if we were to remove that amount. Like I said, the two other options are actually a deduction, a reduction in the taxes, along with the budget Jen had mentioned earlier. That would be a combined decrease of a fair amount for our budget and the warrant articles compared to last year. With that said, I open the table here to any of the board members that want to comment further on that discussion. I start with you, Jen. You have any thoughts? You're on mute.
Yeah. I want to reiterate what you said, that the committee was really mindful about our work. I was the chair of the committee. The committee itself was a phenomenal group of people. I couldn't have handpicked a better committee. So the project itself was really thoroughly looked at, and not just for current need, but looking down the road for what the town needs. We did do a demographic study and why other districts in the state are showing enrollment declining. We are a district that is showing enrollment that's increasing. House sales are up in Bow. So I think it's not just a project to look at for the here and now, but it's a project to look at down the road. And I think we really were mindful of that when we brought forth the recommendation. I do think, being really mindful though of what's going on, it would make sense to maybe press pause on this project for at least a year until people can get back on their feet. But I'm very respectful of whatever decision is made.
Jenna, you have any thoughts?
If I can unmute. Okay. Just mostly that, we have given this a lot of thought, and I think it does make sense to reduce the articles. Again, the elementary school project does have to happen at some point. So I think particularly leaving some money in to keep moving forward, like the $15,000 to keep moving forward and doing some work on it would be helpful. Putting aside the $400,000 this year still reduces the taxes overall, but I can understand also that the community is in a difficult spot. So if we didn't do that, I think reducing it all the way to the $1 million, all the way to $1 would be reasonable too.
Eric, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. It's the projects need to be done at some point. It sounds like a lot of work was put into it. Appropriate planning was put into this. It's unfortunate the situation we're in that we need to put this potentially off a bit, or maybe we can keep things moving to at least some extent over the course of the next year. But in this current environment, I do think it makes sense to talk about decreasing the amounts. It'd be interesting to hear people's comments regarding that, but I'd be in favor of decreasing the amount to either the dollar or the other lower amounts.
Martin, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. So I think I would certainly want to keep the good work going. So I think the design fees ought to be appropriated in whatever amount. Certainly that's debatable. And I also think that given the economic uncertainty, we should definitely look at reducing the $1 million to either rate, really, $400 or $1, either way.
Great, thanks, Martin. So it sounds like, but for getting a significant amount of community input telling us that they think we should stay with the $1 million, I think that it seems like the five of us are pretty confident that that is not something that we're intending to pursue further when we reconvene on Friday. Like I said, we'd really like the community's input on this issue. Anyone that can send us the emails or phone calls to the I think it's districtmeeting@bownet.org. Remember to have your address and name on any of those communications. That would be great. And we'd like to hear from you, because essentially the two options that we're really considering, one is a reduction of $165 on a $350,000 home, which it's something, and it would still put some money towards the project. On the other hand, the other option is a $274 reduction on a $350,000 home, and it doesn't put any money more towards it, but it would. We're still going to have to bond the project no matter what. So that's sort of the the two options for the most part that we've really been looking at. Okay, moving on from here. Next slide, Article 5, please. And Martin.
Thanks, Bryce. Article 5, it reads as follows. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $58,729 to be added to the area school capital improvements Dunbarton Fees Capital Reserve Fund established in March 2014. The sum to come from the portion of tuition payments received in the 2020-21 fiscal year that must be deposited in the Capital Reserve Fund in accordance with the 2014 area agreement. Majority vote is required. This article has been recommended by the school board previously unanimously 5-0, as well as the budget committee 7-0. Next slide, please, Roy. Just a little bit about Dunbarton fees. So this is a capital improvement fee that is being paid by the Dunbarton School District to the Bow School District as defined in the area agreement. The fee for the upcoming year would be $281 per student for the upcoming year. The fee is adjusted by changing consumer price index each year. So currently the fee is $275 per student. That fee that we collect that must be deposited in a non-lapsing CRF. And it's important to note that without the approval of this warrant article, those fees cannot be collected from Dunbarton and would be returned to Dunbarton. And this has been the negotiated area agreement provides the definition for use of funds. Next slide, please. The Capital Reserve Fund was created at the March 2014 annual meeting, and the first deposit into that CRF was approved at the March 2015 annual meeting. The balance in that fund as of June 30th of 2019 was just under $169,000, and the fees in that fund can only be used for the middle school or the high school, since the elementary school is not an area school. And the applicable projects must be capital in nature, so they have to have a minimum life of at least 15 years, a minimum value of at least $600,000, and the Dunbarton share has to be proportional to the student population percentage. Next slide. And that's the article again. Don't think I have to read that again. This article comes up every year, and that's, I think, all I wanted to say to this article, so I will turn it over to Article 6 to Jenna.
Thanks, Martin. So Article 6 is to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $28,000 to be added to the athletic fields and facilities Capital Reserve Fund established in March 2016. The sum to come from student activity fees collected during the 2019-20 school year and will not be raised from taxation. Majority vote required. This was recommended by school board and budget committee 5-0 and 7-0 previously. Next slide. Basically, this $28,000 comes from charging fees for athletics at Bow High School. So it's $50 a sport, $100 for ice hockey with a $100 maximum cap per student per year. And the fees get collected and put into a capital reserve fund for athletic fields and athletic improvements, facility improvements. It's no change from last year. It's the same. The current balance is in the capital reserve fund is $73,358. So this would be added to that amount there. But this article just continues the process of collecting the fees and putting them into that capital reserve fund. Next slide. And that's the article again. I don't need to read it. You can go next slide. And to Eric.
You're on mute. Eric, you're on mute.
I didn't think I was going to do that. This is Article 7, to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $51,000 for the purchase of athletic equipment and athletic facilities upgrades, and to authorize the withdrawal of up to $51,000 from the Athletic Fields and Facilities Capital Reserve Fund established in March 2016. This requires a majority vote. This was recommended, is recommended by the school board 5-0 and the budget committee 7-0. Roy, next slide, please. And this will have no tax impact. The money has already been raised. It is it's a request to allow withdrawal of these funds from capital reserve for these needed projects and repairs. They are needed for the safety of our students. The funds will be used for the purchase of a new pole vault mat, which is currently unsafe in its current state, for our student athletes, for repair of fences at the fields, which some of which are leaning over, and these repairs are needed for safety reasons. Repair and replacement of the backstop fencing at the high school baseball field, which is similarly presenting a safety issue and is in need of replacement, and additional field repairs as needed. Again, this money is already in the capital reserve fund, so it will not impact tax rates. Next slide, please. That's the article again. And next slide, please. I'll turn it back to Bryce.
Thanks, Eric. Actually, thanks all of you for all of your help on these. That's the end of the presentation that we have for today. As you can see on the slide, if you have any questions or comments, again, please email them to districtmeeting@bonet.org. If you want to call, you can certainly call 603-415-3585. Although that looks like a different number, I swear, than I had previously had 415-3558. So I don't know which of those two numbers is correct. Roy or Dean, maybe you guys can chime in on that.
It looks like the 3558 was to report technical difficulties.
Oh, okay.
So
there we go.
That might be why it's a different number.
Excellent. Okay. Well, then call 603-415-3585. And again, start with your name and address. The reason is that if this was, a live meeting, we allow the town people to talk at the live meeting, which is why we, before we take the questions and comments, we need to know that it's actually someone from town. Again, on Friday night, then at 5 o'clock, we'll have. It'll be a similar format to what we just had with the meeting, and at that time we will address any concerns or answer any questions that we receive between now and then. And also then Friday night is when we will move the various warrant articles. As I think was pretty evident, we will be making an amendment quite likely to Articles 3 and 4. And then finally, the voting is Saturday morning, April 25th at the high school. And again, first half of the alphabet in the 9 to 11, second half from 11 to 1. Make sure you bring an ID, and looking forward to it. And unless anyone else on the board has anything else they want to add.
Just remember to go to bonet.org if you have any questions, because there's a nice presentation on the Bonet website. So if people wanted to go back and revisit anything.
Including what we're doing right now. This is all being recorded, and so to the extent anyone missed this meeting, they'll have the opportunity. They can watch this if they so choose at a later time.
Just two clarifiers. One is that if you leave a message at that phone number, it will forward that message to the district meeting email, and that email is being forwarded to all of the school board members. So they will receive every single one of your comments that you put on the email or your phone comment. And on Saturday, you can vote at any time. It's just suggested that you come at those times to alleviate congestion. But you'll be allowed to vote at any time during the day. They're just trying to alleviate congestion by doing with the alphabet.
Although anytime during the day up to 1 o'clock. Yes. Okay. With that, I'll close the meeting. And we'll be back on Friday.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, we're out. Live feed is back to playing music. Looks good. We'll see y'all on